Alright everybody, welcome back to another ZBrush Basics. In this one, I'm going to show you basically how to set up a face really quickly using a female skull, so we can kind of get our proportions down really quickly instead of just like going back and forth and trying to do it by eye and moving things all over the place while we're sculpting, because if you're watching this, most likely you're just starting off in ZBrush, just starting off in anatomy and all that. So we're learning. We're starting from the beginning. So we'll most likely this will help us get into a rhythm of sculpting the female face consistently with the right proportions if we use this in our practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a female skull. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Ryan Kingsland one because it's already here, and instead of using a special one that most likely y'all do not have. So we're just going to use this Ryan Kingsland one. Press T. Going to go to our subtool menu, and we only want the skeleton, so I'm just going to press Delete Other and going to press OK. So now we're left with this. I'm going to grab that. Going to delete hidden, that is in your subtool, or it's in your geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. I just have it right here, so I'm just going to delete hidden. I'm going to grab the front of this, Control Shift A, that way we can see everything that we just, that's connected to what we just selected. Control Shift A, now it brings everything back. Going to delete hidden because all we want is this skull right here. Okay, so some things that we're looking for on a female skull is we're going to have a little bit softer of a transition. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror weld this too, just to make sure. And I'm going to get my move brush, and I'm going to soften this a bit because it's not going to be the angle of the jaw is not going to be that pronounced on a female skull. And the choroid process will be hidden underneath the zygomatic right here, and yeah, that's lined up. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to place our eyes first. So I'm going to insert a sphere, and we're going to find out where that is. And actually, I'm going to go to the skull, and I'm going to send that home. So I'm going to go Google icon, I'm going to turn off symmetry, and then I'm going to send it home. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my sphere. And for me, just because I'm a stickler, I'm going to want this facing forward. So I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees, hold Alt, and reset my gizmo orientation. And I'm going to shrink this down. So in class, we know that this is going to be 50% of the orbit, the overall eyeball, and it's going to be closer to the superior margin of our orbit. Okay, so, and then I'm going to make sure it's behind the brow. I don't want it like sticking out or anything. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror and weld. That's in geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on symmetry, and I'm going to turn on LSym, and I'm going to press Control Shift, and or I'm going to hold down Control Shift and drag this blue arrow. It's going to create a duplicate, and now that I have L symmetry on, it'll go down on itself. And we want to make sure that these lens or cornea are about 50% of the orbit, or of the eyeball, and we're going to have something like that. Okay, and actually I'm going to bring that out a little bit more, and then I'm going to clear my mask, and then I'm going to squeeze it together a bit so it's more eyeballish. Okay, so we have it all set up, and press Shift F, and everything's good. Okay, if you get this, this is very, very weird. So I just Control Z, bring this all the way over here, and I don't know why it, oh, okay, that's right, because we have LSym on. So we're going to go right here, we're going to go Google icon, Wow, this thing still does this. This is so weird. How do we fix this? Rotate it. Ooh, even the rotation is off. That is weird. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna mirror and weld it. There we go. So for some reason, okay. So what I did there is I Control W, mirrored and welded. Now I'm going to auto group it and mirror and weld it, and that way we have our polygroups, and yeah, everything's good. Okay, so it's going up towards the top. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get basically the face here. So I'm gonna change my visible count, and I'm going to actually insert a sphere. Okay. And I'm going to press transparency so I can see through it and kind of get it in the overall shape. Kind of bring that there, and we've got most of it done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Dynamesh it. I'm going to start off with Dynamesh is under Geometry, Dynamesh, it's right there. I just have it on my menu right here. But I'm going to go 32, and I'm going to Dynamesh it because I just want something very, very rough to start off with. I don't want to get lost in my details because generally whenever you're creating art, you're creating them and you are creating it in 3 different stages. You're creating it in your block out stage, which is very rough, gestures to get it down, and then you take a second stage where you're refining things. That's usually going to take the longest, and then third is where you're in the polish stage. So you don't want to jump forward to the polish stage before we even block out this face, right? So one thing I want to do is ensure that this is all, we want to leave some room for the skin, right? We don't want it directly on the skull if we're trying to sculpt a face. Okay, so right here, okay. And I'm gonna pull the nose out. Doesn't have to be anything special, especially at this low of resolution. And for right now, I'm just making sure that this isn't too far off of the skin and creating anything weird. Okay, so now I'm going to go up in resolution. I'm going to go 64 now, and I'm going to re-Dynamesh it and get a little bit more resolution and just take it to the next step. And I usually do this just for my own discipline, because I'll get lost in the details and start trying to sculpt things in when I just need to move things, and it's going to save me a lot of time. Alrighty, and we can leave that for the temporalis. And I'm going to mirror and weld this and re-Dynamesh and make sure we have enough room for the nose. Okay. And we're going to have a good amount of distance between the lips and the teeth. And we'll go over that in class. And just make sure we aren't going through any bones. And we should be good there. So I'm going to go up again. I'm going to go 128. And I'm going to re-Dynamesh it. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start adding a little bit more form. So I'm using the soft form soft brush, but you can use any brush that you feel comfortable with to do this. And I'm going to turn transparency off. Right. And I'm going to make sure that we have this nice flat angle for the malar. Right here. Have that go down. I'm going to smooth that out so we don't have any jowling going on, which will make someone look about 10 years older if you add jowling. If you want to keep a youthful face, just keep it a nice soft angle, or I'm sorry, a straight angle on the mandible part. Okay. And boom, boom. We can smooth that out. It's a little misshapen, but that's okay. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sculpt these ears. So the ear is going to be right here. You can tell because that's the ear hole. And I'm going to get a big brush. And it's pretty much going to be around that big. So I'm going to invert that. I'm going to go from behind and pull it out. Bring this out and make sure the ear doesn't get too big. Redye mesh. Use my Damien standard. And make sure we have our loop, for our ear. And bring that around. And that's good enough for approximation, right? We can worry about the rest whenever we get far enough, right? I don't want a super realistic ear whenever we have all this, right? That still needs to be built up, okay? So we're gonna smooth that out, and I'm gonna go up again. We're gonna go 186, no, 184. And now I'm gonna use my damn standard. I'm gonna go across so we can get our eyelid, redynamesh. Gonna make sure it's going far enough. Redynamesh, holding Alt, trying to get a lid, redynamesh. And make sure that we have some type of, we don't want this face to look too old or gaunt. Okay. So now I'm gonna mask the top, invert it. I'm gonna get my arch, bring that down. We want a closed end for the eye, and I'm not worried about the canthal tilt at this moment. We can fix that later. Gonna bring that out, get this going, and make sure that's meeting, and then we can move this up. And just for approximation, right? And now I'm gonna ensure that the eyelid is equal distance from the eyeball. And your top eyelid should be leading the face, right? So we shouldn't have an angle going down like this where we have the eyelid like back here and this all the way forward. Okay, we need to make sure that the top eyelid is leading. Alrighty, redynamesh, and we'll probably wait because we probably need a little bit more resolution. But I want to ensure I get the barrel of the mouth, so I'm using clay buildup, but I just want to make sure before, we need a little bit more resolution before we tackle the lips. I want to make sure that I have some malar fat here. Smooth that out. And now that we have enough resolution, we can work with this nose a bit. We will make sure the nostrils go back to the edge of our nasal aperture. And then from the bottom, we can just come to a point for right now. But from the bottom, what we're looking for is we are looking for a triangle here, as well as redone mesh. Ooh, we're gonna wait. I'm gonna go up 256 because I kind of need the resolution, right? And I'm gonna hold Alt. I'm gonna dig in once, and I'm gonna press 1, 1, 1, 1 on my keyboard. It's gonna redo that same stroke over and over again. And we just want to make sure for class that you have this nose going, and let's sculpt it up a little bit. And make sure it's not too fake, right? We can make it any nose that we want to after we get the main forms in. And from the front, I want to make sure that this isn't much wider than the nasal aperture. Right, we'll make sure that's in the right place. Coming down. That's right there. Kind of, you know, there is a curve to it, but kind of just want to approximate it for right now. And there's the end of the septal, or the septal cartilage coming through and attaching right there. And that's a good amount of space for the lips. And a little bit more right there. And let's see what we're looking like. Okay, so let's kind of block in the lips. What we're going to do is make sure whenever you close your lips, your bottom lip rests on the gums of your top teeth. Right? So that's kind of where we want to start. So I'm just going to go across. Let me see if I have enough. Yeah, I think I have enough. All right. And I'm going to go 512. So I have the resolution. You might have a different resolution depending on the size of your mesh. So just have enough resolution. Don't have too much. All right, so we're going to put the lips right about there. We're going to shorten them a bit. And now I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to get that going. I'm going to dig in a bit right there, and only right there. I'm going to Alt, only right here. Okay. And now we're going to make sure everything's the way it should be. Okay, so we're going to make sure we have our pads for our lips. And we're going to ensure that the we don't want it to be so pointy on the lips. Bring that forward, and we'll fix this nose for sure. It's a little weird. That's okay. We're just blocking things out. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to mark in my filter here, something like that, and then you can see how all this is coming to a point right here. So I kind of want to fill that in right there. Fill that in. And now I'm going to, under the lip right here, we're just going to hint at it. We're not going to mark it in really heavy. We're going to get the mental eminence, block that in. And we can work on these eyes a bit. So put this, bring this down and over, canthal tendon, lacrimal punctum, dive down, lacrimal punctum, dive down, and we're going to see where we can probably move these eyes up a bit. Let's get that, raise it up a little, just a little right there. And let's go back to our sculpt and let's raise these eyes because they seem to a little low. There we go. Bring that down. Make sure it's following the orbit because we don't want too much space between our upper eyelid and the brow because there's just not a lot of space there. Okay. And alrighty, smooth this out, and now we can start getting our glabella and start getting our infraorbital furrow and all this. So we're going to be a little bit more contrasty here with the eye in terms of its depth. I don't want it to seem too shallow. And let's see. Got that. All right, so let's mark in our infraorbital furrow. So we're gonna make sure this is far enough back, and then we're gonna add it in. And one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to have this sculpt up. We don't want to have this impression that this is doing this, okay? Because there's no muscle that does that. So don't mix those two shapes. You're gonna have this shape down here, and then we'll worry about the other one in a bit. Right, this one comes down, the nasal labial fold, and then we've got the walls of the nasal bone and the nasal cartilage, right? So we need a lot of space here. We shouldn't have nose with shallow depth and then, you know, the rest of the face, because there's a good amount of space there. So just try to observe that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work on these eyes. The eyes usually take the most amount of time, for me at least. I know people can knock them out pretty quickly, but yeah, I just like spending my time there. And let's see, we can redynamesh. I'm going to hold Alt on Damien Standard, so it brings a line to me. I'm going to mark in my bottom eyelid and its boundary. And then we're going to have a nice soft transition between these two. And I'm going to dig that back a little bit more because it seems, yeah, let's work on this. You know, we don't want to dig this back too much, but we just don't want it very close to the front, right? So as long as you just push it back enough, then we're fine, right? You don't need to make this gaping hole back here, right? Like that's enough. Now it's definitely not going to go through, okay? Next thing you want to make sure on your eyes is that we want to make sure it's going diagonally down from here. So if your eye is like this or something where it's straight across, it's not the way it goes, okay? It's diagonally. And how deep that angle is just depends on the variance of life. So you'll have to look at your reference and decide how deep that is, but generally it's about a 15 to 20 degree tilt. Okay. And going to smooth this out. It's a little bit too pronounced. I'm going to go around this nose with my Damien Standard because we want something dug behind there. And the more you let that line stay, the older that person will be. So you want to be kind of conservative about that. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is kind of marking the edge of our orbit. Just going to smooth it out, though. I don't want to leave that line there. That's going to age real quick. And I think there might be something wrong with this temple bone. I think it's a little bit too far back. I think it needs to be something like this. Yeah, for sure. Okay. We're going to mirror and mirror one. Okay. Yeah, because that temple bone was just way too far back. All right. So let's see. Let's smooth this out. Smooth it out. This angle for our zygomatic, we want to make sure it's going back into the ear. Right there. Smooth that out. And I'm going to use my standard brush. And I'm just going to create a 9 with this. And let me get that. Dig this in. Dig that in. Get a little wall going. And we just want to make sure they're not sticking out too bad. Make sure that we have that's fitting the form of the ear. We don't just want it to be super soft behind the ear. There is a crevasse back there. And just make a little 9 and that'll be fine. Make a little 9 and that'll be fine. And get a little earlobe going. And get that going. Alright. Just dig in a little bit. And you just want to make sure your earlobe is leading, right? So you don't want this, you don't want that. You want to make sure that your earlobe is leading the head. Okay. Okay, all right. Chill out. Alrighty, so what else can we do to this? Just to get it kind of set up. And the lips, let's fix these lips a bit more. And generally you can do like a 3-to-1 on this as well. For like voluptuous lips. And there's, you just pick your favorite model and shape the lips up. But in the beginning, it's pretty much what I showed you. That's how you set the lips. That's how you set the lips up, and then you can make them any shape you want after that, or anybody's lips after that. And just going to get that going, and make sure that this is the only part that's actually off of the face, right here. And again, variance of life, so maybe that's not the case for some people, but if you're trying to sculpt a generically beautiful female, then you definitely want to kind of set up that way. Cool. So now I'm going to get my malar fat because it's a little too gaunt here. I can see the malar bone a bit too much. So we're just going to add a bit of malar fat. Smooth it out. And we can probably add a bit more. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I thought. A little too high. Okay. Bring that down. We put in the zygomatic major here, just so we can kind of shape it up. Depends on how much buccal fat you want. We just put that shape in there so it doesn't look too thin. And then we can have the nasal labial fold. Come over here, fill in that space. And I'm gonna shape this up a bit more. And be kind of gentle with it, kind of soft. Because I don't want it to look tired or anything. So I'm gonna add a little soof fat in there, kind of fill that in, and let's smooth this out. Okay. Let's see. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so that's where the nasal bone is. Let's sculpt up this nostril a little bit more. Just on the edge. Not all the way. And I'm going to adjust these nasal holes a bit, and I'm going to use my trim dynamic, kind of get a little ledge here, just right here. And kind of tame that back. Just a little bit too pronounced. Put in our nasal cartilage, septal, malar, and whenever you're sculpting those, a little hint or a little tip is that you want to have this going back up into the nose, just to set it up. Not for everybody, not everything like that, but just to set it up so you can at least have that shape there. Have this rolling back up into the nose, and have this rolling back up into the nose as well. So might need a little bit deeper and redynameshing it. But we definitely want the impression that it's going back up into the nose. And have some lateral nasal cartilage right here. And have that flowing down. Right there, smooth, smooth, smooth. And let's get that in for orbital furrow kicking. I'm gonna get some roof fat, so right here and around, add some of that roof fat so it doesn't look so skull-like. Smooth it out. And depending on the variance of life, you'll see most or none of this upper tarsal plate. And smooth that out. And it's just always going to look weird without eyebrows. So we're going to put those in here too. So what I'm going to do is, well, let's hit this temporal arch a bit. So I'm going to use my trim dynamic and kind of knock that in. Smooth it out because we don't want it too harsh. And then I'm going to put in my frontal bone, which is right there. And then we want it diving down from there. Right. So we want a frontal bone, and then from its boundary diving down to the temporal arch. Filling that in. You can see how much space we still have. We can still dive down a bit more. There we go. Right, now we have much more interesting looking forehead and temple. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to call that the temporal arch. Right around there. Smooth, smooth, smooth. That. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask. We're going to go from here, and that's where we're going to go right there. Press 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. We don't really care about the overall shape. We just want something there so we can extract it. So that's going to be good enough, except we're going to keep groups. We're going to zero mesh it pretty low because we don't need something that complicated. We're going to go 0.5 on zero mesh. Zero mesh it. There we go. That's workable. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just run smooth over this. Thinner at the edge. Just stick it right there. Move this, move that. And you can get your reference for whatever model it is that you're using and get their specific eyelash or eyebrow shape. I'm just going to put in a generic one for now. And then in the further videos, we'll talk about making it look like a specific person. But for right now, this is fine. No, we're just setting things up. Okay. Next, you can put in some hair if you want to. You can just add a sphere and sculpt that up. We'll go in that. We'll get to that in another video. But for my college course class, this is pretty much what we're looking for. If you're interested in having me teach you online, you can go to the XMD Academy and register there. And also teach there as well. So if you're an international student or can't make it out to the university, then definitely feel free to register there. And let's see. Just adding a little bit more hint of the inferior margin of the zygomatic. still not happy with these eyes. Yeah, because you can see they're pretty much straight across from each other. Let's see if we can rotate them out. So don't look so cross-eyed. Okay. Yeah, that's about good. Let's fix this nostril a bit. It's still a little cartoony. All right, using my trim dynamics, so I can get a little bit more of a ledge here. And let's move these lips back. Right there. But to set up a female head for further sculpting, I think this is pretty decent. Right, and again, we'll have plenty of videos in the future. They will be not as in depth as the courses, but enough to move you along. Right. But yeah, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for. Let's see if we can get a little bit more of this temple. See if we can bring this out. So we have a little bit more definitive edge for the malar. So when we turn to the side, we have that pop. Something like that. Let's fix this bottom eyelid. It's just too horizontal. Needs to dive down a little more realistically. Okay, so yeah, that's how I pretty much use a skull to base a face. And again, this isn't the end, this isn't the final result, but to kind of set up a feminine face, I think this is a pretty solid workflow to use the skeleton or the skull underneath. And as long as you know your originations and your insertions, then it should be pretty helpful to you. And I would definitely spend a good amount of time learning those origination and insertions of the sculptural muscles. Not every single muscle, right? You'll need to know every single muscle that's underneath the sculptural ones, because they don't usually have an impact, except for you know, there are some that do, like your brachialis sits underneath your bicep and it's kind of like a balloon, you know, like those type of things, you know, that are going to influence the sculptural muscles. Maybe know a little bit about those, and in some instances know as much as you can, but at least start off with the surface muscles to kind of get you started and kind of understand where those are going to and coming from. And it'll open up a world to you, because you won't be guessing. You won't be relying so much on reference, and that way you can become more of an artist as opposed to a replicator. And I'm gonna shorten that, and this is where we get rid of the skull, right? because we got everything set up. Don't really need it as much anymore. And get a little separation here. Nothing too drastic, just enough to kind of get those superciliary arches poking through. And whenever we're sculpting, we want to make sure it's not a flat plane all the way back like the Sculbella, like straight on. You know, we should have kind of a ledge here and then have it slowly going back. Yep. Okay. Let me fix this nose a bit. Seems a bit too thin. Alrighty. Alrighty, people. So I think we're gonna call it a stopping point here. We pretty much got it set up. We'll talk about sculpting hair and everything like that later on, whenever we get to that point. But for right now, this is all we need to get going in the class. So for those that are just watching on YouTube, make sure you check out the link below to my 10-week course that I teach online. It's way more in depth than this, and we learn a whole lot more about the face before we even get to this point. So definitely check it out. And if you have any questions or any comments, definitely put them down below. And we will see you on the next video.